Auburn basketball will have a new assistant coach on the sidelines for the 2025 to 26 season. Who could that replacement be? We take a look at the short list, plus a recap of some of the performances at the NBA Draft Combine in Chicago. Welcome into today's episode of the Barn Hoops Podcast. I am Jacob Hillman as we discuss the resignation of Chad Prewett from his assistant coaching role with Auburn men's basketball, and then we take a look back at the action in Chicago, where Todd Pettiford, Dylan Cardwell, as well as Johni, Broome, and Miles Kelly were in action in the NBA Draft Combine. But before we continue with that, I want to tell you that today our episode is presented by MyBookie. You go to mybookie.ag. Enter the coupon code BARN, that's B-A-R-N, and you can get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Go to mybookie.ag, put in the coupon code BARN, B-A-R-N, and get your 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. So, as I mentioned, Chad Prewett announced this past Wednesday on his Twitter and X account that he is stepping down as an Auburn assistant basketball coach to move into his ministry role now through Unite US. So first of all, wish Chad nothing but the best as he continues to work with lives and help improve lives as well in that role going forward. But as we look back at Chad's history here at Auburn, he's been on staff since June of 2014. That was just 3 months after Coach Bruce Pearl was hired as the Auburn head coach. So he's been here since the beginning. He helped build the groundwork for this program to become what it is today. 2 Final Fours, 4 SEC championships now, and now the expectation to be in the NCAA tournament every single year. Looking at those roles that he's filled in his time at Auburn, he was the special assistant to the head coach from 2014 to 17 before being promoted into the director of basketball operations role from 2017 to 2023 before eventually having that on-court role as an assistant coach from 2023 to this past season in the Final Four in 2025. Chad Prewett, it can't be stated enough how important he was to the growth of this program and to Coach Bruce Pearl, as well as Stephen Pearl, and everyone who's been through this program over the past decade since Coach Pearl got to the Plains. And that's very important, obviously, for this program. He's been a part of both of those Final Four runs and all those SEC championship teams, and he's helped grow this program, especially behind the scenes. It's obviously, I mentioned those 3 roles that he has filled in his career at Auburn. 2 of those were off the court roles that didn't involve coaching on the floor. Obviously, he was instrumental as well in practices and in film and scouting and in player personnel and whatnot, even before becoming an assistant coach, but those were not his primary roles as a special assistant to the head coach, Bruce Pearl, and the director of basketball operations. That was a lot of, travel plans, as well as setting up events like the Bruce and Barkley golf event that takes place annually. And he was so instrumental in those roles as well as on the floor that it's something that you don't really hear about, and that's a good thing because it means things go smoothly and there's not much to talk about with those things other than how great the event was or how smoothly the travel went and everything else that goes into those roles. So again, we wish Coach Prewett, formerly Coach Prewett, now Chad, just nothing but the best as he moves into his new role in ministry with Unite US. So we kind of want to talk about the short list. Is there going to be an assistant coach search? I'm not so sure. And this is not to say I have any intel or anything, because I just look at the history of how Coach Pearl has gone about things with his coaching staff as the head coach here at Auburn. And he really does promote loyalty, and he respects loyalty. And that's very important to him. And, the short list that I have, and we're going to mention 3 of the 4 names are internal promotions and are part of this Auburn basketball staff currently. And starting off with the man that took over for Chad Prewett in the director of basketball operations role, Maddox. He has been a part of this program for 8 years, starting as a student manager He was a part of the 2018 SEC championship team, that first championship team for Coach Pearl here at Auburn as a student manager. And then it turned into the Final Four and even more. And then he stepped into a GA role following his graduation from undergrad here at Auburn. And again, because of him filling Chad's role, it just does seem to make sense that he would be on that short list and maybe one of the front runners to fill that void if Coach Pearl feels that's possible. Also, looking at Maddox's history and how he got to this point, it's very similar to what Bruce Pearl did to earn his spot as a head coach way back in the 1980s. And it's funny because Coach Pearl tells a story all the time about how, he didn't play basketball or sports going into high school or into college because of injuries and whatnot. That's a stat they always talk about going into the NCAA tournament. He's one of the few every year, if not the only head coach that did not play basketball at the high school level. That's not even JV. And I'm not sure exactly of Maddox's high school history and where if he played basketball, but it's a similar role where Coach Pearl back when he was in school at Boston College and wanted to be involved and wanted to be a head coach one day. He was a student manager under Tom Davis, who was the head coach at Boston College. And Davis eventually moved on to Stanford and took Coach Pearl with him and made him his lead assistant coach because of the work he did as a student manager. Obviously, Maddox has been a part of this Auburn program his entire collegiate and post-collegiate career. It's a very similar role where he stuck with Coach Pearl through it all. And I think that's something that Coach Pearl would love to reward. Maddox, you see him behind Bruce on the bench. He's in that second row and he's helping with so many different things that he's right in the thick of it. He understands how this coaching staff coaches, and he's been a part of it for 8 years. And something that I think goes understated with Coach Pearl and this program and this staff is how little turnover there is year to year. Obviously, Stephen has been with Bruce since the beginning, and then Chad as well. And then you talk about guys like Mike Burgomaster, Ira Bowman, who have been here for 5+ years. Wes Flanagan spent a good deal of time with Auburn, and then now Corey Williams is entering his third or fourth season here with the program, and that's very important for a program like Auburn to continue to build up and grow and become the elite that it is now, and really continue its tournament success. And so Maddox is one of the first names that came to mind. Marquise Daniels, the former Auburn standout. He's the current director of player development in his 7th year with the program, 6th in the current role. He's a GA before moving in to the player development role. And that's obviously a role that's very important and something that suits Marquise very well after playing for Auburn and leading the Tigers to the Sweet 16 in 2003. That was the last Sweet 16 Auburn had made it to until the Final Four run in 2019. That was a 16-year drought. And Marquise was a special player and played 10 years in the NBA and eventually became an SEC legend. He has several he's towards the top of several statistical records in Auburn's record book, and that's very important. But again, playing 10 seasons in the NBA, that's a big deal. That's not something that just anyone can do. You've got to be a great, consistent player like Marquise was to do that. And it'll be interesting to see, again, where his career projects. And obviously his daughter, Sarai Daniels, is part of the Auburn women's basketball team. She's returning for Larry Vickers in his first year this season. So I don't think Marquise is planning to go anywhere anytime soon. I think he enjoys being back home on the Plains. Another former Auburn player, Bryant Smith, he is a current grad assistant and in his 3rd year with the program. Played for Auburn from 1996 to 1999, had that 1999 SEC championship banner get hung, won that trophy under Cliff Ellis. And then he played 14 years professionally overseas. Didn't have necessarily the NBA career that Daniels had, but he still was a veteran overseas where, again, they play competitive basketball. It is not something to roll your eyes at. It is very difficult to play overseas for that period of time and be as good as Bryant Smith was. And there's a little bit of difference between what all three of these guys do. Maddox Jeffries, again, director of basketball operations. So a lot of the work is behind the scenes and, the day-to-day life of a basketball team, what's happening on Thursday after a Wednesday night game, getting ready for a Saturday home game, things like that. Marquise Daniels, director of player development. It's right there in the name. It's developing players to be the best that they can be and hopefully developing them into NBA talent. And then Bryant Smith, as a graduate assistant, does a little bit of everything. And his defensive game was stellar when he was at Auburn, and why he was able to stick it out 14 years. And I think he's helped different guys really improve their games over his last few years with the program. KT Harrell over at Michigan right now, and a former Auburn grad assistant. I think he's the name to look for outside of the program because he's been here. And again, loyalty is important. And KT Harrell has shown that. He's the current director of basketball operations at Michigan under Dusty May. He was in that same role at Florida Atlantic when the Owls made the Final Four under May just a few years ago, and he moved on up to Michigan and obviously faced Auburn in the Sweet 16 this past tournament as Auburn made its run to the Final Four. And again, as I mentioned, Harrell was a graduate assistant under Coach Bruce Pearl and in this staff from 2020 to 2022. Well, he got his grad degree or his master's degree, and then moved on to Florida Atlantic and then eventually Michigan. So that's another guy that's loyal. Obviously, he played at Auburn under Pearl as well in his first season. He played at Auburn from 2013 to 2015 and was the leading scorer in that senior season for him. Had the awesome buzzer beater against LSU in the SEC tournament. So, obviously the common theme here is all Auburn graduates, three of them former Auburn players. Maddox, the Auburn student manager in his time as an undergrad at Auburn. So it'll be interesting to see where the direction turns for this. We, again, wish Chad nothing but the best. And now who will be on the sideline instead of Chad next season? Or will it be someone that's already on the sideline and they're just moving to a different seat down the bench? And I'm sure we'll get an answer to that. I don't know how quickly, but I don't think this will drag along too long as we get into the offseason. As there's still maybe that extra portal addition and that Auburn needs to add. Kind of depends on what Todd Pettiford does, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. And obviously, Coach Pearl still wants to add a big man. So when those details start to arise, we'll have that right here on the Barn Hoops podcast. Till then, we'll see. That's kind of part of it with this transfer portal now, and with the NBA Combine kind of settling down and the mock drafts are starting to come out. The agents and the GMs and the scouting departments are starting to work together and figure things out. We're going to learn more over the next few days and weeks. So, as I mentioned, Todd Pettiford and Dylan Cardwell, they were the ones that really shined. Johni Broome obviously was at the NBA draft combine, but he did not compete in the scrimmages. And before we get into this, I do want to mention that viral video that went about his standing vertical leap. That is something we've known. We know that Johni is not necessarily going to jump out of the gym or anything like that, but he is still so effective and was the SEC National Player of the Year because of his other skills. And I understand why Johni did not go through any of those scrimmages, because all he has to do is point towards his film from the last 2 and 3 years and show, one, how awesome he was this past season, but how much he has grown from Morehead State to now. And there's no reason to go play in a scrimmage with a bunch of guys you never played with and you don't have any chemistry with. It probably doesn't do him any favors. So I don't expect that video or anything, that viral video, for him to tank in the standings. I'm not sure he's going to climb into the first round ranks, but I would still expect him to be a high first or second round pick. That's where the mock drafts are kind of placing him at this point. Those will continue to update as more and more information comes out. Again, the part of the combine are those private workouts, it's the physicals, it's the interviews and just sitting down with the NBA teams and their scouts, their GMs, their head coaches, and having discussions with them about the future of your leagues. And that's something that we don't know about until someone says anything about it, and that's if that happens. So we can't really project anything outside of what we did see from Johni Broome over the course of his college career and those few measurements we got at the combine. But Todd Pettiford did compete in the scrimmages that took place in Chicago over the week, and he was dynamic in game one, less so in game two. Game one, scored 23 points, had 8 assists, 2 steals, 1 turnover, and he was 4 of 8 from 3-point range. And I mean, the reaction when this happened was, well, I mean, he might be a top 25 pick now. He's clearly a first rounder. Why would he even entertain going back to school? And here's the thing. What was also very important was Tahaad's measurements, where he 6 foot flat and maybe a quarter inch without shoes on. That's, again, we talked about that on the last episode of how Jared Harper, Sharif Cooper were not 6 foot tall, but Todd Pettiford is. And is that still too short? It's not tall. That's the point. You know, there's a few guys that have made their careers, made a living in the NBA at 6 foot tall. Chris Paul and he's not Chris Paul. Fred Van Vliet. There's several guys in the NBA now, but that goes to say that, you know, Tahaad, there was a big reaction to game one, the first scrimmage that he competed in, and many thought that he wouldn't participate in another because, I mean, that is peak stock right there. That stat line right there. It's pretty difficult to improve off of that in those kinds of scrimmages where you're playing somewhat limited minutes. You're not playing a ton. Obviously, other guys have got to get their run in as well. So I don't think many expected him to compete again or play another game, but he did. He went out and played a second scrimmage, and this one he wasn't as good. He scored 10 points, had 3 assists, but he had 6 turnovers and was 1 of 8 from deep. And again, I don't think this is something that necessarily tanks his draft stock. I don't think game one actually does vault him into top 25 consideration. That's just how the NBA draft works. You never know what's going to happen on draft night and how the dominoes will fall and whatnot. But you do know what teams are looking for and know what these players are going to give you because there's so much film on these players from their past year of college basketball in Tahaad's case, and then multiple years for Johni Broome and other players that played multiple years. And you understand what you get out of them. And a couple scrimmages shouldn't change all that much. Of course, it does. It proves things. It brings things to light of, okay, well, yeah, Tahaad is a dynamic scorer. Sometimes he probably does get a little dribble happy or loose with the ball, and that was the case in game two. But he showcased everything that we did know. There was nothing that it wasn't some breakthrough where, oh gosh, he can score 35 a game, or we've seen him dish out a high number of assists, and in the NBA, those numbers are just going to grow even more. A couple of other numbers for Tahaad that were impressive was his max vertical leap of 42 inches. That was the second in all of the combine. And in that first scrimmage, he had a breakaway fast break slam with the right hand. And it was kind of funny because it came from the left side. I didn't know he had that in him to go from the left side with the weak hand. And it really just showed his explosiveness that we are pretty familiar with here at Auburn. His lane agility time of 10.63 seconds was tied for 6th at the combine across the week. So, showing his quickness, showing his explosiveness and that he can jump, and that 6 foot frame isn't holding him back that much. So again, it's going to be interesting. June 15th is the NBA draft withdrawal deadline. That's when Tahaad would have to withdraw his name by to return to school. If he doesn't do it by then he is in the NBA draft. I can't imagine we get that far down the line before hearing something or Tahaad making an announcement himself of what the decision is going to be. He's consistently said he is looking for a first round guarantee. I don't know if that means he's looking for one team to tell him they're taking him, or if he's looking for a certain number of teams where he feels comfortable. Okay, if this team and this team aren't true to their words, then this team's got me. And I don't know what that means, but it means that he wants first round grade from at least one team. And if he doesn't get that, then I think he ultimately returns to school. That seems to be the general consensus and what Tahaad has said over the course of the past 2 or 3 weeks. And again, I don't think it's going to take until June 15th for us to learn the ultimate decision. And we'll cover it all whenever that decision is made. Hopefully, Todd's back in the Auburn uniform and leading the Tigers into the 2025 to 26 season. Dylan Cardwell was at the G League camp, and he had a pretty good couple of scrimmages as well in his action. In game one, he scored 10 points on 5 of 6 shooting, had 4 rebounds, 2 blocks, and 2 steals. He was plus 22 in 18 minutes. That is what it's funny, because I think plus minus is sometimes an overblown or misleading stat and things like that. It's not with Dylan Cardwell. Dylan Cardwell is impacting the game that much. He is a guy that's one high energy. That was kind of the buzzword surrounding him this past weekend, and just showing some offensive skill. That's very important for Dylan. That's a little bit different from Tahaad, where I mentioned we saw what we know. We know what Tahaad was capable of going into this, and he showed that. Dylan, on the other hand, I feel like scoring that amount of points, he ended up scoring 8 in his second scrimmage. That's very important for a team to think, okay, this is something we can work with because your defense is so strong. We can work with the limited offense and help you grow that and help you improve that, and hopefully eventually turn into a consistent offensive weapon. And if not, you're at least still a defensive force. And he proved that with his 2 blocks, 2 steals, and the plus minus in those 18 minutes. So in game one, Dylan's team won fairly easily. In game two, it was the other way around. He had scored 8 points, had 6 rebounds, 1 assist, and 1 steal. I think he had a few turnovers. He was minus 15 in about the same amount of minutes. But again, his team on the flip side lost this game. So you have to, again, that's why the stat's a little bit flawed. But I do think it's a little bit more telling for Dylan, especially when it is on the positive end. That's not just saying that because it's Dylan, but Dylan impacts the game that much. We saw it several times this past season as Auburn led to the Final Four. My issue here is that he did not end up getting that invite to the draft combine where Todd Pettiford and Johni Broome were there for a week in Chicago. 5 others were selected over him, and I thought that Dylan did enough to do that. But nonetheless, he and Miles Kelly also performed over the week. He struggled a little bit from 3 to get his shot hot, but again, these weekends, these weeks, while they are important, it's not the end all be all. Those NBA scouts are going to look at Miles Kelly's film and see, okay, he scorched Rupp Arena twice against Kentucky and against Alabama State. He's hit 7 threes in a season opener at Neville Arena, and they're going to see the clutch 3 he made against Tennessee in January to win that game, to ultimately win that game, and that's going to be more important than his 11 shots that he shot this past weekend in a couple of scrimmages at the G League camp. So that's where things are leading. Dylan Cardwell and Miles Kelly not projected to be drafted. I expect the G League team or an NBA team to pick them up undrafted, sign them to a G League deal, and let them do some work down there and continue to improve their games. Both Pettiford and Johni Broome are right there in the same spot they were last time we talked about this. High second round, pick 30 to 40 or so. There's a few first round grades out there. Again, Todd Pedford really lit social media on fire with that game 1, that scrimmage 1 performance he had, where, if you read the replies to some of the tweets, the box scores, and specifically calling out Todd Pettiford, it was a lot of why would he even go back to school and whatnot. We'll see what his decision is. We'll cover it all right here on the Barn Hoops podcast. But again, until he makes that decision, it's just a waiting game, and he has until June 15th to make that decision. And I hope that he's back in the orange and blue, and we will be able to cover him for another season, and he can be the leader on a team coming off a Final Four that's brand new, and we get set for another difficult non-conference schedule from November to December, and then the SEC is probably going to be tough again. There's a lot of turnover in the SEC, and that obviously includes Auburn. Coach Pearl, he was at Jimmy Raines' foundation dinner the other night, and he spoke to the media there and mentioned that he thinks that this team will be the toughest to predict in the SEC because everything's brand new, other than maybe with the exception of Todd Pettiford. So we'll try and cover it all. We'll try and preview it all and maybe give some predictions going down the road as rosters continue to be set and finalized, and we get those final commitments. Auburn will have a new assistant coach at some point with Chad Prewett stepping down. Again, we'll cover all that and more coming up over the next few weeks and over the offseason. And with it being off-season season, we're going to look into some fun episodes. I think want to take a look at a schedule wish list. Some games have been scheduled for this year, so it might be more of just in general down the road. Who do I want to see Auburn play? Who do you guys want to see Auburn play at some point? Obviously, the Purdue matchup that was officially put on the books for December 20th at Gainbridge Arena in Indianapolis. The Arizona matchup taking place in the McHale Center, that will be on December 6th. I believe the 6th is the first Sunday of December. It might be December 8th, so it might be the 2nd December. But right around that time, Auburn will be heading to Arizona for a big home-and-home series. And then Auburn will also be facing Houston in Birmingham at some point. That date is to be determined at this point. But again, there's still an ACC opponent to be filled in there. I expect Auburn to be in Holiday Hoopsgiving again. That game will probably be the Saturday between the McHale game at Arizona and the Purdue game in Indianapolis. So a trip up to Atlanta to face a high major team. Now, who will Auburn bring to Neville Arena? We'll have to find out as those get released. But we'll talk kind of a little bit of that wish list of, going down the road. Who do I want to see Auburn schedule in 2026 and beyond? Or what about right in the present? Who do I want to see Auburn play in Holiday Hoopsgiving and get a home with maybe as well? So we'll cover all that and more on the Bar and Hoops podcast as we move through this offseason. As that roster gets finalized, we'll kind of do some breakdowns of the individual guys on the roster when we get to that point. But that's been this edition of the Bar and Hoops podcast on the Barn Network presented by mybookie.ag. Be sure to tune in all week as Auburn Athletics, even though it is the end of May, there's a lot going on. Auburn baseball is bidding for a super regional host. Will be in the SEC tournament in Hoover as the number 6 seed playing the last game on Wednesday night. Guys over at the Barn Baseball Show will have that covered all week long. And I'm guessing there will be some arguments for why Auburn should be not between the guys, but of why Auburn should be a super regional host, a national seed in the top 8. And they'll have that all covered over the Barn Baseball Show. And then, hey, not to mention, Auburn men's golf still the number 1 team in the country and prove that winning the Auburn University Club Regional. So until we talk next time, and I think that'll be a schedule wish list episode, be sure to follow the Barn Auburn on social media and sign up for an annual subscription at thebarnauburn.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.